Ethan Caldwell found her where the creek had given up on the land. She lay half in the mud, half on stone, her dark hair tangled with reeds, blood drying black against her sleeve. The cold had already begun its quiet work on her skin. One more hour, maybe less, and the mountains would have claimed her without witness. Ethan stood over her with his rifle hanging useless at his side. He had walked past trouble before. He had survived by doing so. Out here. That was how men lived long enough to grow tired of themselves. Her eyes opened. They were sharp, defiant, still fighting even as her body failed, not pleading, not afraid. Ethan knew that look. He had seen it years ago on people he chose not to help. The wind cut through the pines. The safe choice waited behind him. He knelt anyway. Before we continue, please take a moment to support the channel. A simple like, a quick comment, or hitting that subscribe button helps these Wild West tales reach more people who love them. Let me know where you're listening from, and thank you for riding along with us. By late autumn of 1838, the eastern edge of the Mogollon Rim had turned hard and quiet. The pines stood stiff against a pale sky, their needles whispering whenever the wind slipped through the ridgeline. The creek that cut through the valley ran thin and unreliable, its stones exposed like old bones. Winter had not yet arrived, but it was close enough to be felt in the air and in the way daylight fled early. Red Hollow sat miles away, little more than a stopping place for trappers and passing wagons. It was the kind of settlement that survived on caution and rumor. Folks there measured strangers with narrowed eyes and remembered past kindness less clearly than past threats. Ethan Caldwell had long ago learned to keep his distance. He came into Red Hollow only when supplies ran low, and he never stayed longer than necessary. He lived alone in a weather-beaten cabin tucked against the tree line, close enough to the hills to disappear from view if a man didn't know where to look. The place suited him. The work was simple. The silence was honest. He split wood, checked his traps, kept his horse fed, and spoke little. People in Red Hollow thought of him as a man who had seen too much and decided not to talk about it. They were not wrong. Ethan had once made his living guiding wagon trains west, reading land and sky better than most men twice his age. He had survived storms, raids, and starvation. He had also learned when to look away. That lesson had followed him into every quiet moment since. Now, nearing 40, he carried himself like someone who had grown tired of outrunning memory. The woman he had found by the creek lay on his cot, breathing shallowly. Her skin was warm with fever, her shoulder wrapped in a rough bandage he had torn from an old shirt. She had not spoken since he brought her in, but even unconscious, she did not relax. One hand curled toward her chest, as if guarding something unseen. She was Apache. Ethan knew that much by her features, by the way her hair had been bound before it came loose, by the faint scent of crushed herbs clinging to her clothes. Her presence alone was enough to shatter the fragile order Ethan had built around his life. Outside, the wind pushed against the cabin walls. Inside, Ethan sat in the lone chair near the fire, watching a stranger breathe and knowing that whatever came next would not leave him untouched. She woke just before dawn. Ethan noticed it not because she spoke, but because the air in the cabin changed. The fire had burned low, casting dull red light across the walls, and the wind pressed softly against the shutters. He had been dozing in the chair when he heard the shift of breath sharper now, quicker, no longer lost in fever. Her eyes were open. They fixed on him at once. In a single movement, she tried to sit up. Pain stopped her halfway. A sound escaped her throat, half hiss, half breath, and her hand flew to her shoulder. Ethan stood immediately, careful to keep his distance. "Don't," he said quietly. "You'll tear it open." She ignored the warning. Her gaze swept the room, the rifle by the door, the kettle near the hearth, the narrow window, the man between her and it. Her body tensed again, preparing for something she did not yet understand. Ethan lifted his hands, palms open. "You're hurt," he said. "You've been out for a day." Her eyes never left his face. There was no fear in them, only calculation. Whatever she had fled, she was still running from it. She spoke then, her voice hoarse, English careful and thin. "Where am I? My place," Ethan said. "You were by the creek, bleeding bad." Silence followed. She tested her arm again and flinched. The pain seemed to anger her more than it weakened her. Ethan took a step toward the table, reaching for the water jug. The movement was enough. She grabbed for the object nearest her hand, a small knife he had set beside the cot when he cleaned her wound. The blade shook in her grip, but she held it between them. Ethan stopped where he was. "All right," he said evenly. "Keep it. I'm not taking anything from you." They stood like that for a long moment, the space between them tight and fragile. Ethan became acutely aware of how large he must seem to her, how this cabin could feel like a trap. He had guided families across open plains, but he had never been good at closing the distance between himself and another human being. "You could have left me," she said. He nodded once. "I know." That answer unsettled her more than any excuse might have. Her grip on the knife loosened slightly. "Why didn't you?" she asked. Ethan thought of the creek, the cold, the way her eyes had looked up at him, not begging, only demanding that he see her. He thought of all the times he had walked away before. "I was already there," he said. That seemed reason enough. She studied him as if searching for something beneath the words. Finally. She lowered the knife and let it rest on the blanket. Her shoulders sagged, exhaustion catching up to anger. He poured water into a tin cup and set it within her reach. She hesitated, then drank slowly, never breaking eye contact. When she finished, she set the cup down with deliberate care. "My name is Zena," she said. Ethan nodded. "Ethan." She repeated it under her breath, testing the sound. "Ethan." The name settled between them. A thin bridge laid over uncertain ground. He showed her the bandage, explained the herbs he had used, told her she would need to stay still if she wanted to heal. She listened without interrupting, filing away each word. When he finished, she lay back against the cot, the knife still close at hand but no longer raised. As the light grew in the window, neither of them spoke. The first meeting had passed, not in warmth or trust, but in something quieter, a mutual recognition that both had survived long enough to be wary, and that neither had drawn blood when they could have. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Inside, two strangers shared a silence that neither yet knew how to leave. The days settled into a pattern neither of them named, but both came to rely on. Zena slept often at first. Fever came and went, leaving her drained, her skin damp and pale against the coarse blanket. Ethan learned the rhythm of her breathing, how it changed when pain returned, how her jaw tightened before she made a sound. He changed the bandage each morning and again before nightfall, working slowly, never touching more than necessary, each time. He waited for her nod before he began. She never thanked him, not once, and he found, to his surprise, that he did not want her to. When she was awake, she watched. Ethan had been watched before by men measuring his strength, by women weighing his worth, but never like this. Zena's attention carried no judgment. She noticed how he moved through the cabin, how he checked the fire before sitting, how he always paused at the door as if listening for something that never came. She noticed the scar on his hand, thin and white, and the way his eyes went distant when the wind rose at night. Ethan spoke little. He answered her questions when she asked them, but he did not offer stories. He cooked simple meals, set them within her reach, then turned away to give her space. He worked outside when the weather allowed, splitting wood, mending a loose hinge, doing anything that kept his hands busy, more than once. He caught himself listening for her breathing through the cabin wall, measuring the day by the sound of it. On the 5th day, she asked him to open the window. The cold rushed in, sharp and clean. Zena drew in a long breath and closed her eyes. "The air here," she said slowly, searching for the right words. "It listens." Ethan did not understand, but he nodded anyway. He sat back down, letting the fire burn lower than he normally would. The cabin felt less like a shelter and more like a shared space, altered by her presence in ways he could not yet explain. That evening, she surprised him by asking about his work. "You live alone," she said, "but you know how to treat wounds." He stirred the pot without looking at her, picked it up guiding wagons. People get hurt crossing bad land. She waited, patient. He could feel the questions she didn't ask. "I don't guide anymore," he added. Why Ethan's hands stilled. The fire cracked softly. He could have given her an easy answer: age, money, bad luck. Instead, he told her the truth, or at least the edge of it. "Sometimes," he said, "knowing the way isn't the same as doing what's right." Zena considered this. She did not press him further. That restraint, that quiet respect, unsettled him more than accusation would have. As her strength returned, she insisted on doing small things herself. She washed her own cup, folded the blanket, tested her arm each morning with careful movements. When she first stood without help, Ethan turned away, pretending to busy himself with the door latch. He did not want her to see the relief in his face. One afternoon, she asked to sit outside. They took chairs to the edge of the clearing, the ground hard beneath their boots. The sun sat low, warming the stones even as the air cooled. Zena tilted her face toward the light, eyes half closed. "This place," she said, "it feels unfinished." Ethan gave a quiet breath of a laugh. "That's one way to put it." She smiled, not fully, but enough that he noticed. It struck him then how little it took to change the shape of a day. A smile, a shared silence, the absence of fear. That night, as the fire burned down to coals, Zena began to hum. The sound was low and steady, barely more than breath. Ethan froze, afraid to move in case he broke it. The melody carried something old and patient, something shaped by loss, but not crushed by it. He did not know the words, but he felt them settle into him, loosening knots he had long stopped noticing. When she finished, she did not look at him. "My mother sang that," she said, "when storms came." Ethan swallowed. "It's a good song." She nodded. That was all. Later, lying awake in his chair, Ethan found his thoughts turning inward in ways he had avoided for years. He remembered faces from the road families he had guided safely, others he had left behind when trouble followed. He remembered moments when he could have spoken, warned, acted. He had told himself then that survival required distance. that one man could not change the path of things. Watching Xena heal challenged that belief. Her presence did not accuse him. It did something worse. It reminded him that choice had always been there. The next morning, she asked him to show her the land. They walked slowly, her steps careful. His pace matched to hers. He pointed out the creek, the trail that led toward Red Hollow, the line of hills where the wind changed direction. She listened, then showed him plants he had passed 100 times without noticing, leaves that eased fever, roots that numbed pain. They moved through the world side by side, neither leading, neither following, for the first time in years. Ethan felt the weight of his solitude lift, not vanish, but ease. He realized that healing was not something done alone, nor was it something given. It was something that happened in the space between people who chose to stay. That evening, as the light faded, Xena stopped near the cabin door. "I won't stay forever," she said. Ethan nodded. "I know." The answer surprised them both. She searched his face, perhaps expecting more fear, protest, a plea. She found none of it. What she found instead was acceptance, quiet and unguarded. That night, as the fire burned steady and the wind stayed distant, Ethan understood something that had taken him years to learn. Caring for someone did not mean holding them. Sometimes it meant standing still long enough for them to choose. The first sign came with the horses. Ethan noticed it at dawn, when the ground still held the night's cold. His mare shifted uneasily near the fence, ears flicking toward the trees, nostrils flaring at something Ethan could not yet see. He rested a hand on her neck, feeling the tension beneath her hide, and followed her gaze toward the narrow pass that cut between the hills. Someone had come through, not recently enough to be careless, not long enough ago to be gone. The tracks were deliberate, heavy, more than one rider. Ethan went back inside without a word. Xena saw it in his face before he spoke. "We're not alone anymore," he said. She did not ask how he knew. She reached instead for the knife she kept close. Her movements calm but practiced. The quiet they had built between them tightened, reshaped into something alert and watchful. By mid-morning, the visitors appeared. 2 women stepped into the clearing, their approach cautious but unhidden. One walked ahead, tall and straight-backed, her dark hair bound tightly at her neck. The other stayed close behind her, younger, lighter on her feet, eyes wide as they swept the cabin and the man standing before it. Xena froze. Then she moved, fast and unsteady, pain forgotten. "Taza," she breathed. "Asha." The younger woman ran first, catching Xena in her arms, both of them laughing and crying at once, clinging as if afraid the other might vanish again. The older sister followed more slowly. Taza stopped several steps away and looked past the reunion, fixing her gaze on Ethan. She did not reach for a weapon. She did not smile. "So," she said at last, her English rough but steady. "This is where you've been." Xena pulled back, her joy tempered by caution. She spoke quickly in Apache, her words urgent, explanatory. Asha listened with relief softening her face. Taza listened without expression. Ethan said nothing. He had learned long ago that words offered too soon often did more harm than silence. The sisters stayed. They shared what food they carried, sat near the fire, watched Ethan as he moved through his own home. Taza's eyes missed nothing, the way he kept his rifle within reach, but never in hand, the way he waited for Xena to speak before making decisions that concerned her. Asha asked questions, curious, hopeful. Taza asked none. That night, after the fire burned low, Taza spoke. "The men who burned our people," she said, staring into the coals. "They are still moving, still looking for those who ran." Zena's shoulders tightened. Ethan felt the words settle like weight in his chest. "They will come here," Taza continued. "This land is not hidden. You should leave." Asha looked at Ethan then, fear flickering across her face. Zena did not. Ethan stood and walked to the door, staring out into the dark. Leaving would be easy. He knew the trails. He could vanish by morning, take his solitude and his safety with him. He had done it before, many times. Behind him, he felt Zena's presence not as a demand, not as an anchor, but as a truth. "No," he said finally. "I won't." Taza turned toward him, her gaze sharp. "Then you will die." "Maybe," Ethan replied, "but not by walking away." The attack came the next afternoon. Ethan heard it before he saw it, the crack of a branch, the scrape of leather against stone. He shouted once, a warning, and the world broke open. A shot rang out, splintering the cabin wall. Ethan moved without thinking, pushing Zena down and throwing himself between her and the door. Pain exploded along his side as something struck him hard, stealing his breath. He fell, but he did not let go of his rifle. Taza and Asha moved like shadows, quick and precise, arrows flying from the trees. Voices shouted from the pass, angry and startled. The men had expected fear. They had not expected resistance. Ethan dragged himself upright, firing once, then again. His vision blurred, but he stayed standing. Somewhere in the chaos, he felt hands on him, Zena's, steady and desperate, holding him up even as blood soaked his shirt. "Stay," she said. It was not a plea. It was an order. The fight ended as suddenly as it began. The attackers pulled back, retreating into the hills, leaving only the echo of their presence behind. Ethan collapsed. When he woke, the world had narrowed to pain and heat and the sound of breathing not his own. Zena knelt beside him, her hands pressed hard against his wound, her face set with a focus he had never seen before. Taza worked beside her, silent, efficient, tying the bandage tight. "You didn't leave," Taza said at last. Ethan managed a thin breath of a smile. "I'm tired of that." Taza met his eyes then, truly looked at him. Something shifted there, not trust, not forgiveness, but recognition. When the danger had passed and the light faded from the sky, the four of them sat together in the quiet aftermath. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Taza stood. She faced Ethan, her posture rigid, her voice firm. "You saved our sister," she said. "You did not run. You did not hide." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "Now we approve you to stand beside her." Asha smiled through tears. Zena closed her eyes, her hand tightening around Ethan's. The wind moved softly through the trees, and for the first time since the creek, Ethan knew he had crossed a line he would never step back over again. Ethan drifted in and out of sleep for 2 days. Pain anchored him to the world, dull and constant, flaring whenever he moved. When he woke, it was to the sound of breathing near his own, to the low crackle of fire, to the weight of a hand resting firmly against his chest as if to remind his body to stay where it was. Zena rarely slept while he did. She sat close, changing the bandage when it darkened, pressing herbs into the wound with careful fingers. There was no panic in her movements, only focus. When fever came for him, she stayed, murmuring words he did not understand, grounding him with touch and voice. Once, half awake. He caught the edge of a song, quiet, steady, meant to hold a man in this world when it would be easier to drift away. Taza watched from the edge of the room. She did not interfere, but she did not leave. When Ethan woke long enough to notice her, she met his gaze without softness or suspicion. The sharpness she carried before had eased into something harder to define. "You heal slowly," she said once. "I always have," Ethan answered. That earned him the faintest curve of a smile, gone as quickly as it came. By the third morning, he could sit up. The pain was still there, but it no longer ruled him. Zena helped him lean back against the wall, her arms steady beneath his. Their closeness felt different now, not cautious, not tentative, but unspoken and certain. "I stayed," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. Zena looked at him for a long moment. "I saw." Outside, Asha gathered their things. She moved with an energy that felt almost light after the days of tension, humming softly as she worked, every so often. She glanced toward the cabin and smiled when she caught Zena's eye. That afternoon, as the sun slipped lower, Taza asked Ethan to walk with her. It was not a request. They moved slowly along the edge of the clearing, far enough that their voices would not carry. Ethan felt the pull of the wound with every step, but he did not stop. "You chose," Taza said at last, "when it mattered." "I should have done that before," Ethan replied. "Yes," she said simply, "but you did it now." She stopped and turned to face him fully. "My sister does not belong to you." "I know," Ethan said. There was no defensiveness in his voice. She never did. Taza studied him, measuring not his words but the way he stood, the way he did not look away. Finally, she nodded. "She belongs to herself." Taza continued, "And she has chosen you." The statement landed with more weight than any blessing spoken aloud. Ethan felt it settle deep, steadying something inside him that had been unmoored for years. That evening, they sat together by the fire, four people bound not by ease, but by survival and choice. Zena spoke then, her voice quiet but sure. "I will stay," she said, "not because I have nowhere else, because I want this life." Ethan did not answer right away. He looked at her, really looked at her, and let himself believe that staying did not mean trapping, that choosing did not mean owning. "I won't ask you to give up who you are," he said finally, "or where you come from." "I won't," she replied. "I will carry it with me." Taza rose before dawn the next morning. Asha was already saddling the horses, her movements brisk but reluctant. The air held the promise of cold, the kind that settled into bone. There were no long goodbyes. Asha embraced Zena fiercely, whispering fast words full of hope and worry. Taza stepped forward last. She did not embrace her sister. She placed a hand on Zena's shoulder instead, firm and grounding. "You walk your path now," she said. "We walk ours." Then she turned to Ethan. "Remember," she said, "this approval was earned. Do not forget how." "I won't," Ethan replied. They rode out as the sun broke over the trees, their figures soon swallowed by the land that had shaped them. Ethan and Zena stood together long after the sound of hooves faded. The cabin behind them no longer felt like a place of hiding. It felt like something else entirely, a beginning shaped by choice, not escape. For the first time in many years, Ethan did not feel the urge to run. Winter came gently that year. The first snow did not fall in a storm, but in a quiet drift that softened the edges of the land. It settled on pine needles and stone alike, turning the world pale and hushed. From the doorway of the cabin, Ethan watched it for a long while before stepping back inside. brushing the cold from his coat. The fire was already burning. Zena knelt beside it, feeding the flames with careful hands. The light touched her face softly, warming the lines the past had carved there. She looked up when she sensed him. Not startled, not guarded, just present, for the first time since he could remember. Ethan felt no need to fill the silence. Days passed in small, steady moments. They worked side by side, learning the weight and rhythm of each other without instruction. She showed him how to dry herbs near the hearth, how to read the sky when snow threatened. He showed her where the land held warmth even in winter, how to brace the cabin against wind that came down from the rim. Some evenings they spoke of little things, others not at all. And sometimes, when the night pressed close and the fire burned low, Zena sang, not loudly, not often, just enough to let the sound linger in the beams above them. Ethan listened without asking for meaning. He had learned that some things were not meant to be translated, only carried. One morning, after a long night of snowfall, Ethan stepped outside and stopped. A single wildflower had pushed through the frozen ground near the cabin wall. Its petals, small but stubborn, colored faintly against the white. He crouched beside it, amazed. Then called her name. Zena joined him, her breath catching when she saw it. She did not touch the flower. She only smiled, slow and full, as if recognizing an old truth made visible. Some things live, she said, because they choose to. Ethan nodded. He understood now. The cabin, once a place of retreat, had become something else entirely. Not a refuge from the world, but a place within it. A place where the past was not erased, but no longer ruled. That night, as the fire cast its steady glow and the wind stayed distant, Ethan reached for Zena's hand. She took it without hesitation. Outside, the land slept beneath its winter cover. Inside, something small and enduring held fast against the cold. And though the world beyond the trees remained uncertain, the fire they tended together did not waver. It burned not to keep the darkness out, but to remind them they were no longer alone within it.